As a longtime fan of RTS games, Homeworld was a title I never got around to playing back when it was released in 1999. At the time, I was 15 years old and playing everything I could get my hands on, especially real-time strategies. With other big RTS sequels releasing in the same year, this one completely passed me by, and for good reason. FPS juggernauts like Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 released that year, along with some RPG classics like System Shock 2 and Planescape Torment. Online video game sites were still in their infancy, and I didn't subscribe to any magazines, so I got most of my video game news from my friends and Juarez sites. But the name Homeworld didn't really ring any bells up until the past few years. As I've gotten older, I have stopped riding the hype train of big blockbuster games and AAA titles. And I steer clear of almost every single big video game media outlet. With the exception of one mediocre PC gaming website, I have turned to other online resources for information about games. And this is where I've heard a lot of fond, nostalgic mentions of Homeworld. There's a lot of reminiscent mentions about past love affairs with these two games, so when the remastered announcement was sent to my email from Gearbox, I took a closer look at what it actually was. It's incredibly rare that I'll buy a game on release, or pre-order for that matter. I mainly rely upon word of mouth from close friends or social media to influence my purchases, or I'll wait for a price drop to take the gamble. But realizing this is the kind of game that I will generally like, I pulled the trigger and bought the game due to its reputation from people praising the campaign, and because I got a little bit of a discount for pre-ordering the day of release. I was really excited to experience what the nostalgia was all about, but wanted a slight modernization. After all, we all know that sometimes games from our past are seen through rose-tinted lenses. But since this was being revived after 15 years, I opted to experience it for the first time in the remastered version due to it being touted as an audio and visual upgrade only. In this case, it sounds almost like a high texture mod for an older game, or something to that effect anyway. And it's true, the remaster is an audio and visual upgrade, and the game at its core is more or less the same from the original. And what I mean by the same is that the cutscenes trigger the same, the units and unit structure behave the same, for the most part, and the story and dialogue is the same. Aside from upgraded aesthetics, there has been some adjustments to the UI and unit behavior, but otherwise the game is intact in its original form. But with new ideas, sometimes the execution is a little rough around the edges. I've heard some people call Homeworld a masterpiece, but masterpieces are virtually flawless. And while this title is a great title that shouldn't be missed, it does have some issues. Homeworld plays in 3D space on 3 axes of movement. Issuing move commands is fairly simple, but without the instruction in the tutorial, figuring out how to manage this whole space journey is not intuitive. A few missions in the game I was frustrated by not knowing exactly how to navigate my fleet efficiently, and I went back into the tutorial, which I almost never do as an experienced RTS player. The controls are completely unconventional by today's standards. What I mean by this is that mechanically interacting with the interface is cumbersome, and the standard right-click to attack, right-click to move, right-click to heal muscle memory doesn't work like your StarCrafts, Command & Conquerors, or other Commander/Annihilation games. Instead, you right-click and bring up the grid, and left-click to specify the location. Hotkeys are weird. Y is the default repair action, control is the default hotkey for attack, and after you specify what action you're going to use, you must select the targeted unit by left-clicking instead of right-clicking. But oddly enough, right-clicking will cause an action as well, depending on what you click on. It's a little confusing and takes some getting used to. What I found odd is that the action queuing doesn't exist. The closest way to attack a certain group is to hold down the control button and drag a box around the units you want to destroy. But drawing this box is difficult, as it usually will encompass more than intended. This makes it tough to prioritize against a swarm of small fighter-sized ships in real time. There is a pause action in the game which will allow you to rotate the map, zoom in and out, and issue the commands with a clock stop. But I wish I didn't have to pause to accomplish these actions that could be performed a little bit easier. There were a few instances where I needed the extra time near the end of the game, but it was situational and almost a requirement in order to beat those last missions. It may sound nitpicky, but after decades of streamlining the controls of an RTS to the point where almost every game has the same control scheme, it was a little hard to adjust to a scheme that could have been reevaluated during the development process. Although it plays clunky and has a steep proficiency curve, on the plus side, this feels how commanding from a command center would feel. The speed in which the ships move is incredibly slow, so struggling with a command or the UI isn't life or death. However, every move must be calculated and considered carefully before acting. The consequences of your actions may not be felt until 10 to 20 minutes into a mission, and as such, every decision carries a lot of weight. Bad mistakes near the beginning or end of a mission result in having to restart from the current or previous mission in order to have a better outcome. Your fleet is persistent, and transfers from one mission to the next with no base building, meaning all the resources carry over and are finite in number. The margin for error is small, and running with a lean fleet or making decisions that lead to your fleet reducing in size is really bad for the long haul. You have to live with your tactical strengths and shortcomings as the game progresses, which can make a bad player have an even worse time. This sort of persistent progress is a game mechanic that we see in permadeath roguelikes today, such as FTL or Darkest Dungeon. Quick loading and quick saving doesn't really help as it would in other games, because you usually have to go back much farther than a few minutes or seconds to offset the compounded effect of poor decisions. As you progress, new technologies are opened up, giving you a wide array of weaponry to choose from. I could be playing the game wrong, but I found certain units to be ineffective in a lot of situations, basically rendering them useless. For example, it was rare that I used any but one type of Corvette. I felt the other craft were better suited for certain situations and had a better value for the cost. Other units didn't provide the benefit I was expecting, such as the Gravwell. It disabled my own strike craft as well as the enemy strike craft, and the stealth generators didn't really keep my ships cloaked, or at least they were still attacked underneath of their guise. There were other ships I never built once, like a mine-laying Corvette. Maybe I would have done better if I used these tools in their pertinent situations, but I didn't really feel like I needed them. They might have their strengths in multiplayer, which I've yet to spend some time with, but regardless, you have a large arsenal at your disposal by the end of the game to suit different strategies. Going into the campaign literally knowing nothing about the story that it tells, the tone was definitely not what I was expecting. At times it's bleak, mysterious, and desperate, as you traverse the galaxy encountering an opposition that seems impossible to overcome. The introduction is a strong backdrop for the title, setting the galactic stage and establishing a purpose for your journey across the stars. The story begins with a relic discovered on your planet that contains a star map to a mysterious world labeled Higara, meaning homeworld in the ancient tongue. The curiosity compels your people to build a mothership from the technology found in the relic in order to make the hyperspace journey to the mysterious destination. In part, a human is merged with the ship's control system, giving the fleet a voice of the people. Since hyperdrives are reverse engineered from the relic, the first use of the technology ignites an encounter with other life in the galaxy. Like any good space opera, there are aliens whose history stretches thousands of years in the past, and not all of them are friendly. On your quest to reach Higara, you feel truly alone in space, especially after the events unfold in the first 4 or 5 missions. The majority of the narrative comes in in-game cutscenes, which complements the ability to direct your vantage point during battle. Some of these cutscenes are fixed camera angles, and while others allow you to move and migrate the camera to get a different view of what's going on, it feels as if you're the director of a movie that you don't know the script to. And the script is diverse enough to keep your interest throughout the whole journey. Each mission has its own unique feel due to the events occurring in the story, and although a lot of the missions consist of primarily destroying the enemy, they're broken up with capture, exploration, and survival scenarios. So how they're scripted and presented in sequence doesn't make you bring the same mission over and over again, and each chapter brings a different mood and feel. The musical score adds the right layer of timbre to the experience, rounding out with the beautiful settings, from the bright burning supernova star, a mysterious nebula, and a depressing ship graveyard. The graphical update is gorgeous, and the cinematic and audio remastering is crisp and perfect. It's unfortunate more attention wasn't paid to Q&A before release. I mean, there are a large number of bugs, some of which are game-breaking. One frustrating moment I had is that the end sequence of a very difficult mission would not trigger the hyperspace exit. Mind you, this was a second playthrough of an already completed mission, but unfortunately, on the later mission I was on, my fleet was not good enough to survive for more than a few minutes. I was backtracking a few missions to amass a better fleet, so I stood a chance. After realizing the end of the mission would not execute, I found all my objectives were completely missing. I spent over an hour meticulously executing a careful strategy only to have to reload and do it all again. Other such examples is when doing the tutorial, all of the audio played back to back, without even waiting for me to further along with the OK prompt. On another mission, the Bentusi cruiser didn't leave unless I purchased their tech, and on another scripted sequence, it halted all my ships from leaving the mothership. Outside of scripting sequence errors, there's a handful of technical issues. More than once, my screen went black when panning around my units, but the UI was still visible. And in 2 other instances, all the audio from combat completely disappeared. This was corrected by restarting the game, but it's really a sad state of affairs when this apparent labor of love is plagued with all the same issues of a rush AAA, deadline-oriented game. Although I never played the original, there are some minor tweaks to the way the game plays. This has left some of the veterans of the series jaded, as the game doesn't play exactly like it did back in 1999. A lot of the complaints on the list are primarily directed at the formation tactics, as they are basically useless in combat now. Some units behave differently, like the support units, and instead of using a repair beam, they actually have to dock with the ship that they're repairing. Although the original is in the bundle, it makes me wonder why these changes were applied to the remaster of the game, rather than preserving the original tactical formations, unit behavior, and attack stances. Since changes were made to the game, it makes me wonder why other problems were not improved upon. Pathfinding is poor, and ability to point your formations in certain directions needs to be implemented. Your docked units are not easily selected, and are not grouped by unit type, so getting docked units out can be cumbersome. Streamlining the guard command could have also been extended to support units to allow repair to units that they are guarding. Although the list of complaints is large, for me it's easy to overlook them because the feel and experience of the game was positive overall. As the credits rolled and the Holy Overture played over the concept art and credits, I felt accomplished, mainly in part to how difficult the game can be at times. Guiding my fleet through the galaxy to the homeworld was a challenging, rewarding experience that I would recommend to anyone who's a fan of real-time strategies. Although the price tag is a little steep for the bugs and difficulties that come with it, you get a lot in the bundle. Both original versions of each game are included with the remastered titles, as well as a multiplayer beta which I haven't spent any time with yet. I'm excited to move on to the second title and finally jump into the multiplayer fray with my friends. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.